Okay, hello and welcome to MyOsh webinars. My name is Christina and I will be your host for today's presentation. Our webinar today is learning from a disaster, or learning from disaster rather, and how a positive safety approach saves lives, which is being presented to you by Dr. Vanessa Thiele of Sentis. Now, I just want to do a bit of housekeeping prior. So before we start, I will let you know that the chat function has been turned off. So if you have any questions or any comments also, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A panel and we'll open for questions periodically throughout the webinar today. There'll also be an opportunity throughout to answer some poll questions that we have installed for you and interact. So please don't be shy, get involved, have some fun. We're towards the end of the year, so let everything out and get involved. The webinar is being recorded, I will let you know, and I will also send it to all the attendees who have registered, those that are here and have not been able to show up today, once that's all published afterwards. So now let's not waste any more time and hand it over to the fabulous Vanessa from Sentis.
Thank you so much, Christina. It's a real pleasure to be here speaking with you today. I haven't spoken to your MyOsh community before, so thank you very much for inviting me. Yeah, thank you. And, you know, running these webinars can feel a little bit like me talking to myself in my room. So I love a bit of participation. So please do share your thoughts and hop on that Q&A to interact with me a little bit at the end. That would be wonderful. Okay, so before we get into it today, I would just like to give a brief acknowledgement of country. I'm coming to you today from the beautiful Bunurong land in Mornington Peninsula down in Melbourne. So we would like to pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And at Sentis, we do truly value the history, culture and knowledge of our traditional owners. So some of you may not have worked with us before at Sentis. So in everything that we do, whether it's partnering with clients, consulting with leaders, working with people out in the field, running these sorts of webinars or training, our mission is always to leave a lasting impact and change the lives of individuals and organisations for the better. And hopefully our discussion today will contribute to that. I'm hoping that we finish this webinar, maybe leaving you with some light bulb moments, some things to think about, maybe starting to shift the way that you see safety. So our discussion today is looking at when culture goes wrong. And I should just preface that, of course, we also want to really make sure we focus on the things that go right in our organisations and learn from our successes. But in this case, we're going to focus on looking at some typical cases or some well-known cases of safety disasters, because it is really useful to look back in time and see what valuable learnings we can take out of that. So a couple of images here, you might already be triggered and know what we're going to talk about here. So this first disaster we'll unpack is the Deepwater Horizon disaster of 2010. So I'm sure that most of you are pretty aware of this particular disaster, but for those playing at home, it's a BP operated offshore oil drilling platform. And there was an explosion, led to a large disaster that killed 11 crew and caused the largest marine oil spill in history, with a massive social and economic impact across the Gulf of Mexico. So quite a significant disaster here. So this was a very complex work environment. When this disaster or this incident was investigated, and it has been unpacked really to minute detail, we have found out that there were almost 400 urgent maintenance issues that were not being attended to. So they were always put on the back burner, there's no budget, the people are not attending to these maintenance issues. And so the people on the tools and working in that environment had to constantly use workarounds. Even the computers and the computer systems that were operating the drilling rig had to have several backups because they were such old technology that they kept freezing and breaking down. And just imagine for a moment working in that environment where there are so many maintenance issues with tools and equipment and you know, the systems, the structure of the workplace, and these are not being addressed. You know, what sort of message does that send, first of all? We know that Deepwater Horizon was very complex in terms of there's many stakeholders who have competing priorities and goals. And so the decision making around issues was very complex. There was often competition around cost and time and safety. So the priorities were always jostling around. One concerning fact, when I read up on this case and got a lot of the detail, I discovered that the operation went ahead despite many leaders being new in their role. In fact, there were many operational leaders who were so new in their role, anything from 4 days in the job to 6 months. Now, that would be highly concerning for me because you know, you think about how well do they know their role and what's going on within the organization if they're brand new in their first 6 months. And also, do they have the influence at that point to be able to make decisions, change things, or raise concerns and address different issues? So that's certainly something that's worrying. Now, the CEO messaging has been analysed as well. So some researchers actually analysed many of the speeches and communications that came from CEO Tony Hayward. And they actually found that while there was some touch on the issue of safety, the vast majority of the speeches is actually incongruent with safety. It's really pushing to getting the job done, budget cuts, you know, tightening the budget, etc. And so basically the main issue here is that the whole project was massively over budget and over time. So there was a great desire to just keep on trucking forward, keep on going and get the job done and then get out of there. And this is why so many issues were not being addressed. They just wanted to kind of keep it going and then finish and get out of there. And that's when the disaster struck. Let's look at a very different example here. And this occurred earlier this year, I think in early July. So the Ocean Gate Titan submersible implosion. So for those of you that don't know or are not aware of this case, Stockton Rush, the CEO of Ocean Gate, was creating the Titan, a small submarine, which was aimed to be a kind of a tourist venture, really, to take people down to the bottom of the ocean to have a look at the Titanic. Now, he's obviously a very passionate CEO, but what we found, and you know, these details are still coming to the surface, if you like, there was many instances of failure to prioritize safety and a real lack of thorough equipment inspections and checking. The team at Ocean Gate had designed and built this submarine with a carbon fiber hull. Now, that's not typical for submarines. Most of them are built out of steel and titanium. But there was a lot of inventiveness going on with the building of the Titan. And so much so that they put in place a safety system, they called it, called the real-time monitoring system, which is basically a system that incorporates acoustic sensors and strain gauges. And this system is designed to set off a warning signal when there is cracking and popping and when that carbon fiber hull starts to lose integrity, because that's what carbon fiber hulls do under massive amounts of pressure. They're actually not designed for that sort of environment. And so the thing is that this real-time monitoring system is not really a safety system. It's not an operational safety system, because by the time that warning ping goes off, you've probably got up to a second before the whole hub could lose integrity and implosion happens. And unfortunately, that's likely to have been what occurred. Interestingly, Stockton Rush was able to speak to media and talk up this system as if it was something amazing that made his submarine better than others that don't have it. But other submarines don't have it because they're made out of steel and titanium. So, you know, that's very concerning. Many people had raised flags, red flags around the cutting of corners, these experimental ideas. Many people were concerned, even wrote him letters, spoke to him quietly. He allegedly didn't react to that very well. In fact, even may have fired people because of their raising of concerns. And so, you know, since that unfortunate implosion, some interesting things have come to light that he has said that really shine a light on his attitude to safety. Things like this, that he was tired of industry players who try to use safety as an argument to stop innovation. So we'll take a step back and have a think about these two very different cases, very different work contexts. But I would say that there are some themes there that we can see coming through. You know, one is the lack of management commitment to safety. In fact, safety was often seen as something that gets in the way of productivity or innovation. And so whenever possible, it was put on the back burner or disregarded. So that is certainly one issue of concern. And as we go through the webinar, we'll unpack some other issues. But the other one is that we can see that these messages around safety not being important or being put on the back burner is often actually coming from very high up the chain. And that's important because when we investigate incidents, often we drill down the cause right to the person on the front line, the person with the tool in their hand, in the machinery, and we look at the last decision that they were making before something terrible happened. However, what we often need to do is take a step back and look at the organizational setting and what was going on around that might have influenced that set of circumstances. For instance, you know, for the workforce in both of those two cases, we can see that there were priorities and focus from senior leaders that were probably incongruent with safety. There was pressure to meet deadlines and budgets or to be innovative without considering the implications for safety or even, you know, reality. Inconsistent safety messaging. And so in that environment, with that sort of those circumstances influencing the attitudes, thinking and beliefs of the workforce, we can see why this is going to drive certain behaviours. You know, these work teams will be cutting corners. There's unplanned workarounds. I can't stress enough how dangerous underreporting is. If people feel that all that matters is getting on with the job, it's not safe to speak up, people don't want to slow things down and do things the right way, they just want to see results, then what you're going to see is a failure to stop the job when people know that they should be stopping the job, and a lot of underreporting. And this creates the perfect storm for catastrophic outcomes. And when we look at, you know, just about any safety disaster in our history, you'll often see the same sorts of issues coming together, the same constellation of problems. And so let's start to look at the difference between conventional safety and positive safety, because there is another way of going about things. So conventional safety has often been, well, success in safety traditionally has often been framed as the lack of incidents. And so what we've tended to do is look for instance of non-compliance and stamp it out, and we focus on getting people to comply with the rules and regulations and procedures. And this is where we get this target zero. We aim for zero incidents, and that's seen as success in safety. And look, that is an honourable goal, absolutely. Of course, we all want to, try to ensure that people are not injured and get to go home safely. So there's not a problem with that goal in and of itself. The issue is that the way we've traditionally gone about safety is by focusing on the problems, the non-compliance, and trying to push people into compliance. But what we would say here is that compliance is not the end goal here. So the way that positive safety is different, I'll use a sort of a common way to highlight this. We know that health is more than just the absence of disease, right? So health is actually the presence of thriving, of having a fit and able body and mind so that we can do the things we want to do. In the same way, positive safety is not just the absence of non-compliance or the absence of injury or incidents. It's actually the presence of safety and the presence of a thriving and collaborative culture. And maybe to give an easy way to describe this, there's actually two different styles or two different categories, if you like, of safety behaviours. There's safety compliance behaviours or core safety behaviours. That is, following the rules and regs, completing the procedures as they're laid out, all of that sort of thing. So doing what we're supposed to be doing in terms of our rules and regs. That's one thing, but then there's also safety participation or safety citizenship behaviours. Now, this is when we go beyond the bare minimum requirements. So this is when people talk to each other, when they recognise that their mate is making an unsafe choice. It's putting our hand up and sharing ideas. It's sharing concerns. It's getting involved in safety projects. It's speaking openly about the workarounds that we're needing to do and the difference between, work as planned and work as done. It's all of those sorts of things that we actually can't mandate people to do. So these sorts of things only happen when we have a positive culture and positive attitudes around safety. And this is what lies beyond that 0 point of compliance. So in positive safety, yes, of course, we want people to be complying with the rules and regulations and the procedures and policies, but we actually want people to be motivated and engaged in a way that they want to create a safe and enjoyable place to work for themselves and for the people that they work alongside. So if we look at the way that safety is led, or the sorts of leadership behaviours and characteristics that we see at either end of this continuum, on the far left of the continuum, we often have traditionally seen leaders managing safety behaviours. So there was often a real command and control, do as I say, sort of autocratic style, which didn't leave a lot of opportunity for recognizing the expertise of the people on the tools or inviting collaboration and consultation with the teams. There was often a focus on production over safety, a real power imbalance, a power over sort of situation. And often these leaders are focused on the metrics. So, hitting the metrics, getting the bonus, doing what they need to do to look good on paper. On the other end of the spectrum, taking a more, leading a positive safety approach, this is much more about creating a caring and collaborative sort of culture within our teams. So it's participative leadership where there's a more equal power balance. We ask and coach. We want people to get involved. We want them to be engaged, share their ideas. We give opportunity to empower our people to do, make good decisions and do their jobs well. And so our focus here is really to create safe, well, and engaged teams. So, people who can actually make good decisions and work well. So I'm interested in your thoughts on this, how you would describe the safety focus in your organisation. So you'll see that there's a poll popping up now for you on the screen. I'm interested to know where you're at in your organisation. Are you sort of aiming for compliance at the moment? So trying to get to that point of most people doing what they should be doing most of the time. Do you feel that you're sort of there already, maintaining compliance, but the focus is on achieving that zero injury or achieving that zero goal? Or is it, let me see. Oh, yes, I see. Got both polls on the one screen there. That's okay. Or is it that you are aiming for a collaborative and participative safety culture? So answering that first question, if you could please, on your screen. I'll give you another moment there. What's the main focus of your organisation at the moment? Time for a sip of water. Christina, when you're ready to close that poll, let me know how the results look.
No problem. I will just do that there. Okay, so we had a whopping 64% of participants suggest that they're aiming for a collaborative and participative safety culture, which I think is excellent. And the last amount were aiming for compliance, which is good because, I mean, that sort of proves that they're already compliant and a lot more are working towards better safety standards within the company. So, yeah, 64% are aiming for a collaborative and participative safety culture. 21% are wanting to maintain compliance and reach zero injury, and 14% are aiming for compliance.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Really interesting. I think, you know, in general, when I'm having conversations with organizations and leaders, we are at that point really where we see the value of being collaborative and participative. And, you know, people are working really hard to create a no blame sort of incident investigations and this sort of thing. But we're often still struggling with exactly how to do that or where to improve. So hopefully the rest of this discussion will certainly help you with that and give you some ideas. So one thing that's really important to consider, a sort of central theme here, is the motivation for safety. So we can be motivated by many different things, and the sources of motivation, different sources of motivation, have different quality, if you like. So sometimes we're investing in safety to protect us from something, or typically from all of the bad stuff that can happen. So for instance, as an individual, I might be just, my motivation for safety is that I don't want to be injured. So I'm following the rules and regs because I want to go home alive in one piece. As a leader, it could be that I'm investing in safety because I don't want to have to keep policing all the non-compliance because, you know, I don't want to lose my bonus. I don't want to have to do annoying paperwork, that sort of thing. As an organisation, it could be that the motivation for safety is to protect, and when I say organisation, at that level, it's really sort of CEO and board level. So that organisational motivation for safety investment might be to protect ourselves from litigation, from bullying and harassment claims, from bad press, or being shut down by the regulator. Now, these sources of motivation do work, absolutely, but we call those controlled motivation. So that is the sort of I have to motivation. So, you know, these when we follow safety protocols just because of external pressures, like fear of punishment or desire to gain rewards, that will work for a while, but we call that the controlled motivation is sort of the junk food motivation, because while it does work, it doesn't sustain itself. And this is why we often have a situation where we have to check up on people. We have to put systems in place to be kind of micromanaging people, because we actually can't trust people to be doing what they should be doing when they're not monitored if their heart's not in it, if they're not bought into it, if they're only doing it to avoid these negative things. So how do we influence more positive attitudes? Well, first of all, let's learn from different organisations at the lower end of the safety culture maturity spectrum and the higher end of the spectrum. So what we know from organisations, I mean, at Sentis we've done oodles of research over the last decade, looking at the difference between those organisations that are sort of a bit stuck under that sort of private compliance level of safety culture maturity, and those that manage to get over that sticking point. What we often see and reflect on is that the organisations that are stuck down at counterproductive culture, public compliance, where people are only doing what they should be doing when they're monitored or managed, or private compliance, where they'll follow the rules and regs to a degree just because they want to go home safe, but that's all. You don't see any safety citizenship behaviours. What we notice about organisations in this end of the spectrum is that there tends to be a focus on the absence of harm, on lag indicators like TRIFR. There's a real undercurrent of blame, finding who did what wrong, hunting the mistake, and there tends to be a lot of threat associated with safety. I will actually tell you a little bit about an organisation that we did some work with a while ago. They were aware that they had some non-compliance issues in that a lot of people were not following the safety procedures, and people were going in and out of workspaces that they were not supposed to be in, and this sort of thing. So they put a whole lot of cameras in the environment, in the workspace, and they did get people together and they told them that we've now got cameras, so if anyone is not following the rules, you will be seen. And so what do you think happened? They did see a lot more compliance, so they improved their compliance stats to a great degree. Do you think that they saw an improvement in the safety culture though? Not necessarily. And sometimes we have great intentions around safety interventions, but they can backfire if we are basically feeding into this external locus of control, and we're not driving the right system of motivation. When we actually came back and dealt with that company, we asked them some questions around, how are you using that system? Are you also using it to look for and recognise the instances of people doing great work, of people following the rules and regs or going above and beyond? Are you using this as a tool to give positive recognition? Blank faces. Because that's not actually what the system or that intervention was designed for. The other thing is that those sorts of systems, you could be using them to find people who are doing the wrong thing and, punish them, or there's going to be some kind of consequence. Or it could be a method of seeking out how often workarounds are happening, and then leaning into that with curiosity and starting conversations with the workforce and saying, oh, we're seeing that there's a lot of this happening, or that there's actually a lot of people, going into this workspace that they shouldn't be in, in particular instances. Let's find out about that. Let's open a conversation about the difference between workers planned and workers done, and understand that in order to improve the work environment or the systems and procedures. So in these great organisations that manage to tip over that edge of private compliance and get into a more collaborative culture, what we see is that they're looking for the presence of safety. They're focusing on building the capacity and capability of their people and their leaders. So they're looking to really empower people to be doing the right thing. Rather than blaming them for doing the wrong thing, they're looking at what do we need to put in place so that it's easier for people to make good safety decisions and, practice good safety behaviours. They're hunting the good stuff, and they're really looking at their system from a user's eye view. And this is really important to actually lean into what is the user experience, if you like, of our work environment. Because people have an experience of safety. What we would like is we want to see positive attitudes around safety. We want people to feel that brain reward circuitry set off when we do speak to a mate and tell them, that they might have forgotten, a safety procedure. We want them to actually have positive feelings about contributing to safety and being part of that movement. But what we often see, far too often, is that people actually have quite a threat response around safety. So when we conduct our OSCs, our on-site safety, I've forgotten the word there, when we speak to people across different organisations about their safety culture, we really tap into their safety attitudes. And we often hear, unfortunately, that people are, I'm just afraid of being caught doing the wrong thing and getting a window seat home. So they're afraid of being fired for minor brain lapses, basically. Or, sometimes they're afraid of being that guy that resets the metrics. So one of the safety leaders I've spoken to and interviewed we have a book getting released next year on positive safety. Little plug there. But I've had the opportunity to speak to some amazing leaders, and one of them was talking about a work site, an oil refinery that they used to work at. And thousands of people work at this plant. There's a big entrance, and at the very front of that entrance, there's a huge billboard lit up in lights, and it actually has a counter of the LTI-free days. And at one point, it was something like 572 days LTI-free. And he talked about the vibe in the teams that he would go and speak to, and everyone was petrified of being that guy that has the incident that can't be hidden, and you end up being that person that resets that counter to zero. So again, goals like zero harm, zero injury are really good at heart, but they can inadvertently really set up a bit of a threat response around safety. So the safety experience is something we need to be very aware of. And our safety experience isn't just physical. So this is our safety experience model, and it unpacks that there are 3 different dimensions involved with our safety experience. So there's certainly the physical safety experience. So this means our physical experience of the workplace is everything from our work environment, the equipment that we use, the tasks that we complete, whether they're hazardous or not, shift work. So it could be that, I work in underground mining for 12 hours a day doing high risk work. It could be that I work in an office with, no fresh air and hardly any lights in a very kind of stressful situation. So there's the physical element of the role and our job and our work experience. Then there's this social dimension of our safety experience. So this is relating to how people relate together. So it's relationships, it's communication, it's trust. So here it's the connection with our leader, with our teammates, and with people wider across the organisation. And then there's the psychological dimension. So there it's our safety experience is how the work environment and job influences our personal resilience and our feeling of well-being. But it's also how elements of the job affect our psychological experience. So burnout culture, for instance, not having clarity around our role, all of these sorts of elements will impact our psychological experience of our role. Now, each of these 3 dimensions are important in their own right, but they also have a huge potential for interaction. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that. you could have a worker who works in a very physically challenging role. So take the underground worker who's working in underground mining 12 hours a day, high risk tasks. It's dark and hot down there, physically very demanding, okay? Now that person could have a fantastic team that's really supportive. There's a lot of banter. They get along like mates. They feel very open to talk about issues, to chat to their leader about the job tasks, stress levels, etc. So if there's a great leadership there, if there's a good team that feels supportive, then psychologically that person is probably going to be able to maintain their well-being and resilience pretty well. And those physical conditions are going to be tolerable. In fact, that person could really be thriving. In another context, though, exactly the same physical work and context, but take it that this person has very difficult relationships within the team. There could be a lot of competition. There could be a leader that's always on the warpath, looking for things that people are doing wrong. It has everyone walking on eggshells. No one wants to support each other because they're all just got their heads down trying to maintain, their own protection. In that circumstance, this job could really start to incite a bit of burnout in that person. Their resilience and well-being will be compromised. And so it's a completely different workplace experience. And when you think about human error, so often human error is underlying a lot of the incidents that go on. Who is more likely to have to suffer from human error or have instances of human error occurring? When we think about the safety experience of the people within our teams, we can actually see that this model can help us to prevent things that haven't happened yet. What we want to aim for is getting a positive experience within these three domains. And you might see this as a little bit like a fidget spinner, if you like. When we can start to get positive experiences going in each of these elements, this starts to actually spin faster. We gain momentum and we can get in a really great place where people are operating to an ideal, optimal level. But the same can be said for negative experiences. So it could be one significant, experience in, say, the social domain. In fact, a lot of our research that is just coming out has shone a light on just how important that social experience of work is. It could be something like a change of leadership or some change management and restructure that's going on within the organisation, for instance. That could cause a bit of negative experience in the social and psychological domains. All of a sudden, this safety experience model starts spinning in the opposite direction. And what we have is people who are distracted, stressed, overwhelmed, and actually not as competent to do a good job as they would otherwise be. And so what we want is actually to have positive experiences and look at how can we build in to the job and the structure of our organisation positive experiences in these dimensions so that we can be setting people up for success. We want people to be making good decisions, to be behaving not only in a way that is compliant with safety, but we want people to be giving a bit more and going above and beyond. In order to do that, they've got to feel safe, well, and engaged. And, this is something that we've been saying for a long time at Sentis, but we've really unpacked it now. So feeling safe on a brain perspective means we feel protected, respected, valued. We feel that we can trust people around us, and we have a sense of belongingness in our team and in our organisation. Feeling well is about sort of that wellness piece, feeling calm, cool, calm, and collected. But it's also about believing that I have the ability to meet the demands that are on my plate. And feeling engaged means I'm connected to meaningful work. I'm connected to the people and purpose of my organisation, and I actually want to contribute and feel that I'm enabling us to move forward. So this is how we can get the best out of people. And so by designing situations in which people can have a positive physical, social, and psychological experience, that's how we can actually get the best out of them. And so there's a bit of a shift that happens when we move from only doing safety to avoid the negative things to choosing to do safety because I want to gain the benefits. So on an individual level, when we start seeing that, being safe, making safe decisions and behaving safely helps me go home safe, but it also means that I want to go home with fuel in the tank so I can play with the kids or work on my motorbike or, do that walk around the park or whatever it is. As a leader, it's choosing to invest in safety because you see the value of team cohesion. You want to see the collaboration and participation. And it also enables you to, move on to bigger tasks and not just be focused on driving compliance all the time. And as an organization, so that's the CEO and board level, their focus for safety, when this becomes being a great place to work and making a positive impact on our people, of course, that means we're likely to be avoiding litigation and all that bad stuff. But it actually means we start thinking about how do we make the experience of work positive so that people can be thriving and flourishing. And so this style of motivation is what we call autonomous motivation, or I want to motivation. This is the sort of motivation that not only ensures people are willing to comply with the things that they have to, but they actually want to contribute more. So if you haven't actually, if you're not sure where your safety culture might be, a very simple way you can do a little check of that is to complete our safety culture maturity quiz. So I invite you to take out your phone, and that's a little QR code that you can take a picture of that will take you to that link. So it is really useful to know where your organisation, and that's a very short snapshot, obviously, but it will give you some food for thought. It's useful to know where your organisation sits on this safety culture maturity model, because we need different interventions and different strategies at different levels. And what we tend to see is that the safety continuum, the positive safety continuum tends to sit underneath that in terms of, when we start moving out of this controlled, I have to motivation and into that autonomous, I want to motivation, that's where we tend to see organizations becoming collaborative. We start seeing citizenship behaviors, and it opens up a whole new world of potential that's so much more than just achieving compliance. So in terms of avoiding the next disaster in your organisation, whose responsibility is it? I want to start off by introducing some research that we've done, and this research is a couple of years old now. We've actually done some new research focusing on those different dimensions of safety experience. But this one was a very large research sample, and we're actually very lucky as an organisation to, I think we're working with something like 100 clients at the moment. So we have a very valuable insight into what's happening in different industries. But this particular research is looking at 73 different sites across 9 countries and 8 different industries of work. And this research sample is also qualitative and quantitative. So it's based on interviews with people actually going out and speaking to people live, as well as our surveys that are completed. So what we see from this data is the top things that people are doing well in organisations that are at that top end of safety culture maturity. What we see there is that there is a strong focus on safety, mission, and vision. So the safety vision is very well communicated and known and accepted. But what you will see hand in hand with that is management safety commitment. And I can't stress enough that these two things go hand in hand. Having a safety mission and vision without demonstrated safety commitment falls over. And I'm sure you've seen instances of that in your own work history. We also see in these workplaces that are thriving and working very well is that there's a high within team safety communication. There's also high safety responsibility. So people are talking openly and positively about safety. People are willing to take their 50% or take ownership. That's often a key signal that they're actually choosing to be safe for their own reasons, rather than feeling that they have to do safety and wanting to avoid that. And there's also team support for safety. So this means that when there's new initiatives, when there's new things that are trialed, or there's change happening, people are willing to get on board and experiment or take it on and give feedback. So where do we need to focus, or who is it that needs to start doing the doing? Now, what we really want to emphasize here is the strong importance of the board and CEO and senior executives in actually leading a positive safety approach. Often there's a lot of focus on frontline leaders and also the individual contributors. But what we've tended to find, and this really came out in a lot of the interviews that I've been having with leaders for the book that we've been writing, without the support of those highest in the organisation, right up to the board, leaders do not feel empowered to be able to make the decisions that they need to, or they don't have the resources and capability and capacity to actually do what they feel they need to lead a safer and better and more agile organisation or team. And so I'm really going to put the pressure on those higher up in organisations to do what you can do to lead positive safety. I'm going to focus here just briefly on 4 different elements, or these are 4 principles of positive safety. These are 4 of 8. Actually, we have 8 principles of positive safety. We're going to hone in on these 4 today. So first of all, there's leading with a vision. So, of course, it's really important for leaders. We often hear about leaders communicating the vision and cascading that down, but that vision has to come right from the very top. And, I'd sort of ask you whether how much does your board and CEO communicate that vision for safety? I will tell you a brief story, actually, that was something I just a moment of brilliance that I heard about in these interviews. One of the organisations that we've been working with was actually going through a CEO change. So they had a fabulous CEO who'd done a lot of great work, and he and the leadership team had really built a very people-first organisation. So it's incredibly important to them that they are valuing the well-being and resilience of their people, because they work in a high-risk field, but it's not just physically high risk, but it's also emotionally very challenging, the field that they work in. And so looking after their people is really a central, priority. When they were changing leaders, CEOs, they're actually quite worried that, there's a potential to get one of these CEOs that wants to come in all guns blazing and just focus on results, and sometimes they can kind of tear shreds through the organization. And so it was actually the board that met with the senior leadership team, and they said, what are you looking for in a CEO? What are the characteristics that we need to recruit for? What matters to you most? And that's when, they had some great conversation. The senior leaders were able to reflect that we want someone that's going to maintain the good work we've done and push it even further in terms of looking after the well-being of their people, having that people first focus. And so what they did is they modified the position description and gave it to the recruiters. And funnily enough, there were some candidates already for that role who actually saw this new and revised position description that was very focused on culture, and that people first. And they actually withdrew from the race. And one of them gave the feedback that, oh, it looks like this organization's all into that culture stuff. That's not for me. And the senior leaders actually reflected that they've probably dodged a bullet there. So I thought this was a great example of a board and senior leaders, senior executives working together to do what's in their control to ensure that they're leading for positive safety and they're maintaining the vision that they've set. So I think that's fantastic. There's a few points on there which are really important. Safety is on the board agenda. Safety experience, is the board actually looking at how engaged are our people? Are they motivated? How are they feeling about their work? Rather than just focusing on TRIFR, they might be taking in other measures and being invested in that safety experience to ensure that they're leading with the vision. The other thing that is important with leading with a vision is looking at how does our vision trickle down to the systems and processes within our organization. So hiring and firing, the way that our reward and recognition strategy, incident investigation, every major thing that we do in the organization, how does this connect to our vision? Is it congruent with our vision? Then there's actively caring. And of course, when we think of actively caring, we think about leaders showing care for their team, which is absolutely important, of course. Actively caring is also about upholding safety as a core value, being willing to hire and fire leaders who are aligned or not aligned. But it's also looking at what decisions do we make at a board and CEO level. What decisions do we make that communicate that we actively care about safety and that we're committed to safety? Because this is where sometimes, people hear that safety is really important. It's our number one priority. But then, hang on a minute, there's 400 urgent maintenance issues that are not being addressed. And they keep pushing us for production, even though they know things are unsafe and the conditions are not ideal. So there can be miscommunication here. So we need to think about, how do our decisions at a higher level trickle down, and do they communicate that we actively care and that we're committed to safety and the experience of our workforce? Being curious. Now, as I said earlier, many organizations are really working hard to try and create an environment where incident investigations are sort of blame-free, where we're trying to move towards a learning environment. This is not always coming across to the workforce as smoothly as possible. So often we need to start changing some frames around safety and around these kind of processes. One great organization, I had an opportunity to speak to a fantastic leader who told me about a new process that they've been trying for the last, I think, 6 months to a year, which is working really well. So previously, they have a whole lot of people on the plant, on the floor, and previously safety leaders would go around at intermittent times. And often people felt like the safety leaders were there kind of like the safety police, right? Safety cops. They're going to pop out from behind a pole to catch them doing the wrong thing. And so what tended to happen is, it's like turning the lights on and everyone scurries. As soon as the safety leader's on deck, everyone would disappear or suddenly need to go to the toilet. I've heard of this firsthand from people. So this, the frame around this needed to change. And so this particular leader told me about how they started a process whereby for 2 hours a day, at the same time, all of the safety leaders go around and have some chats with the people on the tools. Now, those people know that they're coming, they're expected, but they also really communicated to their workforce that we're not here to catch you out. We recognise that there's going to be workarounds happening. There's going to be that gap between the way we plan it and intend it and what happens in the field. And what we want to do is we're seeking to understand We want to understand your perspective. We recognize your expertise because you're the one on the tools. You're the one experiencing these tasks on a day-to-day basis. What we want to do is learn and find out how can we support you guys to be safer, to get what you need in order to do the job well. And so that's what they did every 2 hours every day, which is phenomenal. You know, for 2 hours every day, they're not allowed to be in their offices doing their paperwork or computer work. They need to be out in the field engaging with people, building rapport and relationships, understanding the issue from their perspective. And this has had immense success. After they have these conversations out in the field, these leaders then come back together and they have sort of a co-coaching situation where they talk about the issues. They find out where other people have found the same thing. They're able to hone in on the major things that need to be focused on first. And, you know, they give each other feedback around the coaching that they've given in the field. So there's some great work being done, and I think that's a fantastic idea. And that's what you call leading with curiosity. So a very important skill set for a positive safety approach. And then there's also making data-based decisions. So in that, we're talking about, you know, are we equipping ourselves with the right information so that we can make good decisions that support positive safety? I know that many leaders out there are trying to sort of get away from TRIFR and that sort of LTI data. It's incredibly difficult because it does have a time and a place. It does allow us, it's kind of the standard measures, right? The metrics. So it does enable you to see whether things are consistent or they're going up or down. What it doesn't give us is any indication around why things are changing or where we need to focus, what do we need to focus on so that we can start to improve our safety metrics. So what we'd really encourage here is that we track metrics and data that allow us to understand the story behind the data. So this is where we might actually need collaboration between HSE and HR so that we can get some of that data around the climate, safety climate, the psychological safety climate, you know, the incident investigation sort of climate, you know, all of these sorts of things so that we understand how people are thinking and feeling and the experience of work that has led to the safety outcomes that we're looking at. We can also think about, are we looking at the right kind of data? We have been recently working with an organisation of major utilities in Queensland who used to track and investigate every single incident. And a lot of those were very minor incidents that were probably driven because of the fact that they've got an aging workforce. You know, they're actually a really good organisation to work for. People don't want to leave. They've been there for 3 decades. So you have a lot of sprains and strains and things like this. If all of those are investigated, we're potentially wasting a bit of time as opposed to being able to zero in on those high potential incidents. So high potential incidents that actually happened or the near misses that signify high potentials. You know, by actually zeroing in on those particular cases, we have a much greater likelihood to avoid those disasters of the future rather than burying ourselves in red tape. So there's a few ideas on making database decisions. I'm just looking at the time here and I'm seeing I'm very close to time. So I would like to just hear from those on the line, please. Which of those 4 principles, leading with a vision, actively caring, being curious, or making database decisions, which of those do you feel it's most relevant for your organisation to work on right now?
I will just note, Vanessa, I have relaunched the poll. So one of our lovely delegates has mentioned that in order to answer one question, you need to answer all 4. So If you've already answered one,
Yep.
please go through and do that again. But we will keep a track of all answers that have been submitted previously. And then when you are ready, Vanessa, we do also have a few questions. So I'll wait till you throw that over to us and we'll go from there.
Great. I love a little technical glitch. I mean, it keeps us all on our toes, doesn't it? Wonderful. Give you another moment. Which of those would you like to see happening if you haven't answered already? Since everyone was probably forced to make an answer before, Christina, I'm happy for you to jump to those results if you've got them.
Okay. So we have half. Oh, it's changed now. Let me just close it so it stops changing. Won't be a second. Okay, so we have 45% of people saying that so 45% of people wanting to their organization leading with a vision, 27% making data-based decisions, 18% are actively caring, and 9% being curious.
Awesome. Fantastic. Yeah, and all of those will have really positive results, and you probably need to focus on different principles of positive safety at different times. So, but that's really interesting, leading with a vision. And I think having connection between how the vision is talked and how the vision is walked in terms of that experience of safety in the workplace. I think that's interesting that comes out on top. So I don't want to go to overtime, so I will just very briefly wrap this up. Of course, there is a real what's in it for me in terms of, why should we actually put some energy toward creating a positive safety approach in our work environment? Well, what we know is that when senior leaders are committed to safety, they're communicating and demonstrating that safe decisions and actions will be backed and supported. When people feel that senior leaders have their back when it comes to doing things safely, then what we see is increased reporting of hazards, near misses and mistakes, collaboration, and more of that safety participation and initiative taking, which is so powerful. And that's how we get the best possible outcomes. So just in 1 minute or less, I want to just highlight, do you remember the Fukushima disaster? That was the tsunami that was created by the earthquake in 2011. And the reactors of Fukushima, the nuclear power plant, melted down. Everyone thought this was just a natural disaster. It's unavoidable. But that's actually not the case. What we found when researchers have unpacked this case, they found that this plant had not been maintained for years and years and years. There was a lot of coercion between the people at the plant and politicians and all these sort of things. There's a lot of underhanded stuff going on. What people don't know often is that there's another reactor in Onagawa, which was actually 60 kilometers closer to the epicenter of the earthquake and closer to the tsunami. This one didn't melt down, and it's no coincidence. So the senior leaders at Onagawa were extremely committed to safety, even to the point that when that reactor was built, they did research on past instances of tsunamis, and they looked at, there was generally up to a 3-meter tsunami sort of range. They built this plant on a 15-meter rise, almost 5 times the previous kind of record of tsunami. So they were actually planning for the unprecedented. And not only that, they trained their people that tsunami is not only possible, but likely. So people were ready, they were planned. This is something that the researchers noted. They were organized, they were prepared, they had all of their disaster sort of systems ready to go. And at the end of the day, Onagawa was actually so safe that a lot of the community members that have been displaced from their houses actually sought shelter in the hall at Onagawa's plant. So very, very different from the story of Fukushima. So that really shows the immense power of leading from the very top, a safer culture. So I will flip to, if you'd like to discover more, and we have a fantastic new sort of a resource for you on creating a positive safety approach in your organisation. This has lots of information, some tips and tools. It actually has a checklist of the full 8 positive safety principles in that. If you're interested to get your hands on that, please do express your interest. Have you got a pop-up for that, Christina, if people want to express their interest to gain that paper?
We have a poll which a lot of people have already answered. And we will also be able to contact everybody that has registered today and ask the question, as well as send out these slides. So fantastic. Everybody will be able to get in contact with us after this.
Great. And we also invite you to get some information on Safety Climate Survey as well. So if you would like some more information on our climate survey, we can certainly give that to you. So thank you, Christina, for having me today. And I really invite people to get in contact if you want more information, if you just want to have a chat about what's happening in your organisation. I'm very contactable on LinkedIn or these other places. So yeah, thank you.
Not a problem whatsoever. Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. As I mentioned, we will be sending out the video recording of this, as well as the slides, and answering any of our questions that we didn't get to today. And if you do want any more information from either Vanessa or myself, from Sentis or Myosh, please reach out. We're always around and happy to help. Have a wonderful rest of the week, everybody, and stay safe.
Thank you.